Page 26, Chapter 2. My artwork accrued a small fortune over a 5-year period. Naturally, supernaturally, people showed up. Appeared a while now to help set up what came to be known as the Circle I Am Academy, better known as simply EM. By that same serendipitous connection, some excellent artists, illustrators, craftsmen, writers, and filmmakers coalesced with wisely invested funds to generously support the endeavor. A lot of it rode on my international reputation as a prodigy now, not only in art, but also in philosophy. Thus, a humanities wing was added as a new addition to the renovation of old abandoned sewing machine factory. As a space, it served to promote art and this philosophy explored inward a memory world in the heart of that large small town in our lifetime. That philosophy served as means, as an instrument, instrumental as an eye to see, to realize that I am first of all a person unborn, unseen, and unfortunately largely unrealized at this time now, our lifetime. Yet here, there already being any or everybody as nothing but that I that am as it is. Why, you see, dear reader, listener, that paradox in just us as one indivisible being of it who sees. Predominating whoever now then looks thinking to know it only as otherwise. Why as otherwise? As such, it is such that you or I are I, as seer, one indivisible singular who sees nothing but itself, ourselves, throughout any lifetime. You see now nothing but you, unseen, only as thought to be information. Information. Only a while now, and it won't be long or short for that matter. A lifetime, only thinking as if looking at thoughts, information mirrored in words. Words such as eyes, nose, lips, fingers, toes, etc., etc. As if that subject felt that seer, that one who sees, as if nothing, that I am now nothing, as if nothing but an object of my memory mind, or why, for whatever reason, anybody seems to appear out of it, looking out in a mirror after a while, after years falling under the spell, understanding any inward spelling out of it. There it is, here now knowing that paradox, a paradox of itself, ourselves, contradicting our own reality. Reality of a real it, why now reduced to an absurdity. Absurd it, why it as it is, as though born only to die after a long or short while struggling, suffering mightily just to survive, maybe catching some all too brief grins along the way. Why? Why, you or I gotta laugh. Laugh! Laugh as of finding just us. Why, only as sex, as existing a while now, a keen, cunning, cruel, twisted hoax of our lifetime in denial. That twist of DNA. Deny. As to in denial of a singular who? Who? That one unseen, unborn, unconscious of who knows. Who knows of it? First of all, a person. A person completely unfazed by it, as it is and forever cannot but be now. Nothing. Nothing now but you in reality as any or everybody. A reality of a singular one who forever sees nothing now but you. It's you. Forgetting itself, looking to be whoever thinks of themselves, felt as though being born to death. Now then, here, there, that I am then now, a child prodigy at 3, already metaphorically killed, as it were, run over by that delivery truck at 2 years young, killed from any chance of living my life normally, merely as thought born, saved, as it were, by a potent voice, potentially within any or everybody, only arising consciously in cases of extreme peril, such as, well, nearly getting crushed by a delivery truck. Though that voice saved me, it simultaneously destroyed, or at least tempered my ignorance of it over the rest of my life, leading to the present some 7+ decades hence, but then now I get ahead of myself. Yet from this perspective I might add that at that time, looking back to that first opening of my eye beneath that truck moving overhead, found me without a head, or any appendage like ears to hear or fingers to touch. Thus it seems, in a sense of merely seeing it all, other senses are learned of it over time. Why? As sex, as existing, only learning to feel it, to appear disappearing at the same time. Now again, that paradox, the paradox of it, why contradicting itself, ourselves, for a lifetime reality of absurdity, as though born only to suffer until death, catching a few jollies along the way as X. Now, that voice destroying that intent of ignorance, intentionally disregarding reality to live a normal life of absurdity. It offered instead an intent of finding it out for myself as being free of it all along, of it completely free now, forever. Only who knows, who sees. There was, of course, fortunately, that opportunity to find that freedom only after many years and tears of suffering sufficiently to temper that realization, and that, of course, that is what makes any story interesting. Like the man said, unless you have eaten sufficiently of the bread of sorrow, you cannot fully appreciate the ultimate serenity of freedom. That I am first of all a person, unborn, unseen, unfazed, free of it. Why, for whoever we may think or feel we are. As a child prodigy from ages 3 to 7, that reality of a real it, why, as for myself, found me out prior to falling myself under that spell. Reality found me in a position as that person. Seeming then all too heir apparent, keenly as expressed, voiced oftentimes in an ancient language, Sanskrit, coming intermittently with a modern vernacular English, that made me sound like an avatar, that some interested parties, such as media magnate J.B. Stone, professed me to be. You see now then that reality, as voiced through me, came so many years ahead of its time, approaching nearly 10 decades later in the 21st century dawning Aquarian age. Even writing at this present time, it remains yet a promise to revolutionize consciousness, released from an ancient, archaic, dark, synoptic agreement right now, left sparking across bipolarity in a heavy, heaving, having to hold again only to lose, ionizing, supernatural, supersonic electromagnetic field of you or I in the dark, sacred Christos, Krishnas, blackness now to be the ark of the covenant, with a God essay to be embedded in the mind or memory of man as thoughts, thinking of it with intent to only know it, not ever realizing who, forever immortal, forgotten why, forgetting death from death. Whereas that coming age promises an indiscriminate pouring out of its self-awareness, not to be unconscious, rather right now left without a choice, but to live with intent to find ourselves in any lifetime free of it, freedom of it, as you or I, our eye, see or see nothing but the one who sees, seizing on it for themselves, ourselves, out in a lifetime, a person unborn, unseen, immortal immortality as a reality all along. Ironically found, it would lose itself for decades to come, for me as for most, in a continuing status quid pro quo, a status substituting ignorance, deliberating, debilitating disregard of itself as why, now not as exio, sexual as existential, as ex hodus, exodus, allegorically told in biblical book as causing inward sound vigorous waves in binary eye, still, so still, motionless, more pervasive, appearing, staring, starring itself, appearing SX editing, experiencing, duplicating Eve and Adam. Bipolarity, so positive, negative, now knowing, negating itself in two twisting by denial. By DNA, I'll appearing by baby, now then as skying of itself, disappearing. After a while now, a short while indeed. Page 28. Any old hoo-how. I merely found myself channeling this ancient language, Sanskrit, called the elder sister of Greek and Latin. It peppered itself throughout my speech. It would be over 2 decades till I actually learned to translate it consciously. I mean, I wasn't even that aware at that time of most of what was said through me in English, that it was mostly all miraculous memory of overmind, supermind, Superman as mind, or why not now, was the sheer magic of those days. After all, I had not now then really begun to think of myself at that time in any memorable personal way. Like I said about words, me or my, here there is now then no possessing of free memory, intelligence, consciousness, nor possession by it. It is complete, completely indivisible as being conscious consciousness now and then, y'all knowing, positively projecting denial consciously of itself as thought to be yourself or myself, that itself as me being conceived of a memory concept came with reading, or having read the press that my drawing drew along with that singular philosophy espoused so flamboyantly by a wide open mouth. A mouth then now, unrestrained by self-consciousness of nothing but a person, unseen, unborn, and for the most part played as a part unrealized. Naturally, this also drew a vociferous chorus of critics from the established Protestant Christian clergy, who mostly just shook their heads trying to decide if I was an alien, the devil, or a commie plant. The 1950s were then now an era of red baiting, blacklisting, and covert Cold Warring propaganda. Some of my press denigrated my philosophy as radically subversive, if not downright destructive to the very fabric of our great American society. It was, as I was, the voice of the great destroyer of the ignorance that perpetuated inward the inward mirrored mirage. It was through me a philosophic counterpoint to atom bombs. I was the kid blowing minds out in the crowd, a boisterous kid who has the innocent audacity to call out the emperor's nakedness, our invisibility out in time now, then even appearing scattered out and about, and hence in our time of our lives lived indivisible. If I hadn't achieved fame with art, I probably would have been on ice in some institution. Many were thankful as the art and philosophic expression faded. Often, I could be brutally blunt with people, therein showing little emotion, patience, or sympathy with the sorrow brought on ourselves out of it, ignorance of it. I was too young, too uncompromising to understand how this sorrow layered into a life over years lived only in memory limited right now, merely left out as artifice of the artificial identity, of that subdominant new knowing intellectual out of it in word brain. The inward left subdominant brain hemisphere of language talking on a twisted pseudo-dominance, as of course people love to talk. Hearing our voice seems to validate an artificial identity out in as existing in word identity based on an arbitrarily given name alone, a name that in course of our lifetime takes on a while now a deceitful duplicity life of its own, a while now a cunning, keen, cruel deceit of just us alone, as though born out of it only alone to die, a while now inward, falling under that spell, understanding so positive, knowing in word the spelling out of it. Still, I as well as will turn out as intended before being so rudely interrupted by that damn delivery truck, delivering a preferred intent to find it for ourselves free of it now, found myself, as we all it seems must find ourselves, lost inward out in time of that status quid pro quo, sank, Found myself so lost, sank deep into the spell, substituting in word an artificial identity. Identity bipolarity so positive now, knowing, negating myself out of it in my memory. Yet, that's where the story gets interesting. You see, the town also thrived on the infamous reputation of Wyly'em, and in many ways, town fathers were glad to help cover up the passing of Free Willy. Page 30. Passing from boy to adolescent, captivated in word. Ironically, I continued to now then appear outward Willy, but of increasingly more, of less words. This situation would come to a head shortly after my last and second encounter with JFK in 1963, only 3 months before the assassination in Dallas. I went to the White House with a photographer, cameraman, and liaison to record some of the event for the Academy, whose board of directors hoped to put together a documentary. I brought a leather portfolio to do some sketches, which of course I would not show JFK and Jackie, as they would be crappy and expose my deception. I had been invited to spend the night at the White House and have an intimate dinner with JFK and Jackie and sleep in the Abe Lincoln bedroom. We got to the White House in late afternoon. We were ushered into the Oval Office where JFK was just concluding a meeting with his Secretary of Defense. I recognized him by his slicked back hair. Another guy was there smoking a fat stogie, who later I learned was Pierre Salinger, his press secretary. There was also present a blonde woman, smoking a Carlton cigarette. She introduced herself as JFK, continued to counsel with the secretaries, giving the 4 of us a nod and a wink with that Irish grin. Her name was Mary Meyer. She was also a painter, well publicized in Time and Life, major magazines of the day. She had a dazzling aura and seemed somehow more intimate with JFK than Jackie, who I wouldn't meet until later that evening. I could tell by her body language she and JFK were kindred spirits. She embodied the enlightenment of a fellow artist, whereas I had found Jackie in the press seeming more superficial. Not that most everybody at that time, including me, didn't have a love affair with her. I genuinely liked Jackie, despite her somewhat whispery voice that seemed a little affected. Now, actually present, I sensed an intimacy that JFK and Mary Meyer seemed to share. Tragically, Mary Meyer would be murdered 6 months after JFK's passing. Anyway, it was amazing meeting a woman in the Oval Office, let alone an artist. Someone who said that she had taken LSD within the first 20 minutes of our conversation, which only lasted about 45 minutes. Then I was still well aware of who we really are, so I guess anybody's past history of an artificial identity is continually up for grabs, especially mine, and I was only 14. That day, Mary Meyer captured my heart, quoting something I'd said about it years earlier that ended up in a Time magazine spread. How about it, reality, was all a virgin mother, Ma's potentially possible stuff, yet it remained still pervasive, motionless, formless, unaffected in any way by all that stuff, a reality of itself that I am. At the time of the article, saying reality was all that I am went over like John Lennon saying the Beatles were more famous than Jesus. Yet, when you actually find it out for yourself, as that I am now reading the article, you may wish to include yourself, concluding that who, ever, why, for what, that is written or talked of as being that I am is you right now as zany reader reading it. But a lot of people, in hindsight, wish to take it or talk it the wrong way right now, as left out thinking of themselves otherwise, other than me, of course, as being that international phenomena and all. They took it, why, way out of context, as excluding themselves, as thoughts of it thinking of me as an epitome of nearly sacrilegious vanity. I, in my naivete, at that time, blown away by the invective that statement brought on, learned to repress the voice. Little did I know then how, now later, this repression would blow up in my face. Now then, Mary Myers struck me as an Isis, a veritable goddess of a woman who saw really good what was going on. Knew of it intimately, as her ex-husband, I found out later, had fallen to the dark side. CIA. She witnessed firsthand how a man can give up on peace to join the constant covert cold warriors. She was a porpoise in a shark tank, and the sharks always seemed to win. In a way, she left more of a lasting impression on me than JFK. She would, decades later, be the inspiration for a novel that I would invest the rest of my life writing. But in 1963, women had yet to be liberated from their assigned role as sex object and housewife. It was her influence that turned JFK from cold warrior to peacenik, costing him and her their lives. The ultimate cost of alienation from the agenda of a multinational security state corporate military industrial intelligence complex that even the old general had warned us all about. One the old general himself helped engineer. Few had the influence to do much about this spreading cancer on the nation. Mary Meyer did. Mary Meyer died before she had the chance to expose the pernicious tentacles of this intelligence establishment sucking the blood out of our republic. Now, I'm not politically involved. My thing is liberation, a freedom that can only be realized as a within, without B-sides. Yet, being in the White House, around all this political frenzy, just naturally brought out this reaction that rocked my sense of inner equipoise. Page 32. Washington, of course, is nothing without Lincoln. In that I am, was, and continually will be a big fan of Abraham Lincoln. When I think or hear the word patriarch, biblical or otherwise, I conjure up Father Abraham, that is, Abraham Lincoln. By 1963, I was 14 and reading pretty good. I read everything I could on Abe the man. The one thing I thought of more than anything, even bathing in the smiles of JFK and Jackie, was sleeping in Lincoln's bed. When JFK's people contacted my people at the Academy and asked me to do JFK and Jackie's portraits, separate of course, I agreed on one condition, that I get to sleep in Lincoln's bed. It would be as riding on the wings of angels to have this experience, almost like it was my raison d'etre to touch that which he touched. Maybe I thought some of his goodness, his integrity, and humor would rub off on me. One story I recall amongst so many about the time Abe, as a lawyer, riding the court circuit in Illinois, where prosecutor, defender, and judge rode together from courthouse to county courthouse, tells of how typically he would fall far behind. That's because Abe would frequently stop to help some poor critter stuck in the mud or fallen from a tree. A judge describes looking back to see a gangly Abraham climbing a tree to return a fallen sparrow to its nest. That is a father any country should want for itself. Of course, later as president, he would be caught between sides so deeply divided, slavery or freedom. That divide, bringing civil war and death to millions, created such controversy to Abe's sterling reputation that his assassin thought to be hailed a hero. Assassination brings to mind a recurring dream I had en route to Washington and JFK. A spirit guide kept putting me in a car, sailing along through canyons of high-rise steel cages, bursting with throngs of people anguished with hatred on their countenances, while crowds down on the street smile, cheer, and wave in adulation. Then the car stops as cannon bursts flash. Suddenly it moves rapidly in reverse until it fades back into oblivion of a singular consciousness. The one lesson you may learn immediately upon death: there is not here or hereafter now for whoever any real division of it. Now no it besides it, only a twisting of thoughts of it as being twisted into a being twin between more or less of a now indivisible individual consciousness. So my mission is simply to offer that I am of it indivisible, invisible it, why, even now out in desiring visibility, still free, completely free of it without any attributes. Out in it here now, there is something to some thinking that it is nothing. As it is, there is here now nothing you can do without or about it. Y'all, anyone being that all along first a person that I am, can do it justice to find it just us, merely seeing. I could see death reflected in JFK's eyes. Yet now then I'd done my homework on JFK. I knew he'd been at death's door several times already, and well, when you're an historic person like Abraham or JFK, you are bound to have a premonition of your death. JFK, in effect, a modern Julius Caesar with the magnetism to pull the republic out of the hands of a militarized oligarchy back into those constituted constituents, must see Brutus, LBJ, breathing down his neck. Now, for me then, politics was a blood sport with deadly repercussions. Still, that ultimate, intimate reality realized is now not caused or affected by any mirrored mirage of it, any dream of it, not in the end, the middle, or the beginning. Who knows now? Knowing, projecting, denial, denying who, well, why, for whatever we'll wish to be, is still never born, and therefore never actually passes away before our eyes, never dies. Yet the show of emotion goes on and on and on. JFK was now then a big player in that terrible political game. He, the skinny, sickly second son. Now, not the prima donna's first, Joe Jr., killed in World War II. JFK was a player in constant pursuit of that poon, requiring daily injections of hydrocortisone. His testosterone level was through the roof. He told me that if he didn't get strange every day, he got migraine headaches. Catholic, in a puritanical wasp land, such promiscuity would turn his own Secret Service against him, adding them to the list of covert Cold Warriors, Texas oilmen, Nazi rocket engineers, and perverted paranoid FBI director, along with recently sacked CIA director. Y'all got the makings of a serious cobble of insurrection, assassination. It was into that milieu then now I'd brought some doses of LSD. They were on fire. It was as though mere awareness of them burned with its own yearning to melt through those artificial fences surrounding any felt field of view of you or I. Perhaps it was the scintillation of destiny present in that white people's house. Instinctively I patted them, safely snapped in the left breast pocket of my cowboy shirt, covered with a beaded leather vest. The Academy was among the first of our area to promote indigenous sacred art. Two native artists, Mary Smallbear and Julie Crowhart, beaded power mandalas on the back and front of that leather vest, and exquisitely woven multicolored patterns. Otherwise, I probably looked like a honky ancestor of Pee Wee Herman, with horn-rimmed glasses beneath butch-waxed hair, a look quite normal for the times, though the hair would grow out soon enough. Page 34. The leather vest, covered with the beaded power symbols, offered me a sense of protection here at the white people's house from that undercurrent of alienation and paranoia enveloping society at large on the brink of nuclear annihilation. JFK's administration felt like a brief respite from a flat-top, shaved, button-down authoritarianism prevailing Cold War America. Would we reach the space age before falling back to Earth life, repression of any possible expansion of consciousness? Expansion beyond archaic religion with narrow-minded, rigid, frigid, absurd, neurotic sexuality. The current occupants of this white people's house offered a brief breath of fresh air with a whiff of cultural, humanitarian, artistic sensibility. JFK wasn't supposed to be president. Nixon, the Republican Red Baiter, was the one, groomed as vice president to a general who would himself, in all good conscience, warn the people of the very complex of military-industrial corporate intelligence that was and is in the process of solidifying their hold over the executive et al. Government, a government supposedly for and or by the people. JFK couldn't be his own man calling for peaceful coexistence. The good old boys just weren't going to let that happen. Perhaps he could realize it within himself, a final liberation before his inevitable martyrdom. This then now seemed to be my mission, an admission liberation. Freedom now, forever. It, that singular thing of all thinking. In thinking, you or I cannot now get it. Only know out of it a projection of denial of it, yet without wishing to be willing to be realizing why, for what, who knows, it is, y'all, love in vain. In vanity, as we are all appearing it, born to death, we are doomed in a sense. Sensible sensory wave our body, everybody to deny it a while, death that is, yet ever free in reality as being merely aware, in awareness of that doom, that doom is now not a final liberation, means that it's still at hand as again and again and again that doom of blackness ascending it, bound now to be knowing, projecting it A gain merely supernaturally as thoughts of a god, esse, too big in being, superimposing itself completely, covering a naked singularity now, clothed in a blackness, complete still. You cannot now gain it because you are it. At the same token, you cannot lose it because it is you that I am, whoever, Evarai body, one singular, body of itself, wishing to be anybody, indivisible, individual, invisible it. Why? Why only the artificial, superficial, superimposed non-self passes away, therefore I merely appearing, staring, found myself it like a camera, incapable of judging it as good and bad. Whoever judging whoever, how now, brown cow, as being it, wishing to be now not it, the entire transitory creation of it is evil. Of evil, her will, Eve, our eye body, out in her eye, wishing to be willing now not to find out about it, to think of it as transitory. We may save a life for a while, but it will still appear disappearing, passing away right before our eyes. Still, even then, I had developed a fondness for monkey wrenches, metaphoric and allegorical ones that could be tossed mentally into the mentality jam of belief systems, cobbles of authority and power brokers. JFK would find himself, as he wrote to me later, witnessing being now appearing, disappearing information dissolved in acid, merely that I appearing it. AI on LSD. Such were the effects of the psychedelic on his keen mind, vivified by the kind, kindred influence of Mary Meyer, influence of true universal love, doomed now only knowing it. No, winging, projecting, denying immortality, as by polarity so positive, now knowing out of it as being born by negating death as life, merely mirrored superficially a while now of that miraculous memory, knowing ours as being a popular people project, projected projection of it out in arbitrary time, arbitrarily now passing away, projecting as being that projection, ourself off, on finding just us lost out in memory of a given name alone. Thus the mentality now I knew as that I am here wishing to be willing to pay attention, to buy him and our republic some more time of it. Why now, as exposing the covert schemes that sought to derail peaceful coexistence and social integration. At least I hope that we might try giving it some thought in that regard, regarding that I am people of we, a single, singular person, indivisible, one nation, of a notion of just us, inward understanding, thoughts of a supernatural God to be a gain, only superficially superimposed as zany or everybody. Still, I knew the cobble served the same God, as all thoughts arose from common intelligence, an intelligence that could ultimately neither destroy nor be destroyed. Perhaps suffering and despair offered a more direct path to liberation. I really could not now be sure whose agency I ultimately served. My main guide, humor, made a laughing stock of that sheer duplicity, as being anybody only mirrored out in memory alone. People who took themselves too seriously must be right now left out as otherwise aside of any mythical defense, dividing as well as circumscribing feeling a felt field of you or I, witnessing of it. Only who knows, maybe there is here more laughter in hell than heaven. Meanwhile, now, back at the white people's house, we had dinner in a more or less private room. Our photographer, James Urban, a gregarious soul, peppered conversation with a clever double entendre that kept you in stitches. Page 36. Main reason I brought him along. I knew I could count on him to deflect any conversation directed at me. At that time, I frequently found myself lost in deep silence, seeking to deny the voice speaking through me, the voice of the destroyer. Let it be silence, I thought. At 14 in the fall of 1963, I just wanted to play ball and kiss the sweet lips of Melinda, the coach's daughter. I had known fame, fortune, and incredible success early on, so I thought as an athlete I now could not fail. I needed only to put the voice behind me and live within the limitations of a body that was reaching manhood. 1 month earlier, I had enrolled at the local high school, which interestingly enough now had no art program whatsoever. So let me backtrack a moment to Mary Meyer's rather surprising conversation about LSD's transformation of consciousness. She seemed capable of reading my mind, almost as if she were aware of my mission, with the doses burning in my pocket. I got lost, finding myself in the depths of her gaze. There appeared to be her here without beginning or end. As said earlier, I had met conversely with some heavy hitters, premier thinkers of our day, all males. I had little contact with a mature female, especially one seeming now more self-aware than most of the men. Speaking poetically, I would say our minds embraced as she spoke of the great transformations she saw coming with the spread of LSD, liberating the feminine half. I blurted out that I was holding some of this very substance, hoping perhaps to guide JFK on a journey into the soul that very evening. She laughed at first, thinking I had to be joking, but looking into my eyes, her expression turned serious. I then asked if she could join us. I felt JFK could relax more with her there. Her eyes rolled until she looked up, shaking her head. All she said was she'd try to meet up with us later. I did not ask how that was possible, as JFK's meeting was breaking up. The president walked over and shook my hand like he remembered me. He said something about football as he called some secretary to show us where we'd be spending the night. I was afraid for a moment that my request for the Lincoln bedroom had been forgotten, but as soon as we left the Oval Office, another assistant took Jim Urban and Frank Connor, the filmmaker, in another direction. Our liaison, Paul Kraft, stayed in conversation with Pierre Salinger. Suddenly my spine surged with a rush, feeling Abe entering my bloodstream. Or was it the acid seeping through clothing and skin? A metallic taste permeated my tongue. The last word, spoken word of Mary Meyer. I felt my attention moving deeper into the silence, a silent pressure pressing down under the weight, that constant weight of waiting. Waiting now for only who knows when our time is up. Now then, Lord Death is known. Still I, as y'all, pretended that be unknown. Even now, knowing full well that inward, of itself existing Lord of life or death delivered me in a word to a life that day beneath that delivery truck. That presence of death I knew made those around me sometimes nervous and uncomfortable, even now as it still pervaded everybody with Jesus gravity waiting in it, the weight of waiting. Yet realizing that at any time now, appearing, disappearing may be found as simply disappearing of me or you while living on in memory. Once as being realized, aware in that instant awareness that I am, prevails above and beyond any mere mirrored memory of itself. Yet now, speaking seems to recall bipolarity, a distance between me or you, echoing in a sense here now, hearing it, YSX editing, duplicating itself as sound, vigorous waves out of Ma's possibilities. Get it? As X, y'all. Sexual bipolarity of Ma and Pa. Caught up now, not speaking as that out loud, my attention remains seemingly indivisible without any weight of waiting to speak. After all that I am ever whoever is waiting on whom has possibilities merely mirrored memory potential of now knowing, ignoring it, as being now not a destroyer of that ignorance. Now, only wishing to be knowing out it why that mirage as X, y'all, as sexual as typically blonde hair, big boobs and long legs, telling myself, avoid the voice, still ringing in my ears. So, swallowed up and down in the silent hole, I found myself lost, laying across Abe's bed. Closing my eyes, I imagined him, all lanky 6 feet, hunkering about in the log village of Salem with dreams of walking vaulted halls of power. Last man to walk from a wilderness clothed in buckskin out into an industrial world of iron horses steaming over rails leading to civil war, then assassination. Y'all, that honest goodness, bringing him his brains blown out, his role playing out in a playhouse. Abraham, all sinew, bone, and broad humor, capable of finding light irony in the darkest hours. A tower of strength, splitting 1,000 rails for enough cloth to make a pair of breeches. I tried to imagine JFK with his soft muscle of a privileged life, swinging a maul with sweat leaking through finely combed hair. JFK, a good sailor, but never had to do an honest day's work in his life. I'm stretched out on Abe's bed, letting my mind wander into wonder, excited about meeting Jacqueline, a veritable love goddess, even though I know she won't match the depth of Mary Meyer, a truly extraordinary woman. I felt still lost in her. Page 38. Drifting, I thought again about the doses in my breast pocket. My one and only experience thus far with LSD had been truly extraordinary. Having it once awakened under its influence, still as being fully aware of yet itself existing that indivisible invisibility that I am even now with open eye invisibility, why it is easy on letting go of preconceived notions or imaginings of it as myself. In other words, I was already pre-dissolved of a typical evolved notions we all assume to be ourselves by age 7. Any image imagined on LSD or otherwise now, not you or I as we are I inward, immutable in sight of a seer seeing merely appearing, staring, it never ever actually appearing out in visibility, outside of it. Thus I, of I now not inhibited or inhabited by inward thought thinking of itself, myself in formation of words like eyes, nose, lips, legs, fingers, toes, etc., etc., freely tripped, as that eye dosed with acid freely tripped on a light fantastic finding itself opening multidimensionally, taking on a constant turning role of a realm of infinite potential, quite beyond any limits thinking of itself previously imagined, out in that wave our body of now being to wish to perceive itself existing. Why, whoever, for whatever, whenever, colored in hues of man's mind, or why, or you, or I, by colors of a radiance pulsing electric, LSD, it seemed accelerated consciousness from a gross limited physicality to a super subtle instantaneous electromagnetic free-floating luminosity. The experience may allow one to realize physical death is actually shedding a skin like an old heavy overcoat, an overcoat actually consisting of a con, a deceit of wishing to intend to think of itself as thought felt by polarity to be between now itself, or a knot of itself entangled, twisted in two of itself, as though a twin caught in a web of our own deceit, having the time of our lives, even if only lasting a while. A while now, so sure of it, so positively knowing out of it, projecting a denial of that which is, of course, still itself. Anybody being to wish, to intend, to perceive, thinking of itself existing supernaturally as a god, essay to be, a go, to function as function of it. Why now? A knot, an entanglement. Why? To inform it of ourselves, anybody, as experiencing itself. That funny action of function. Why? As sexual. You gots to laugh, as of realizing that on LSD. That you cannot now or ever see yourself, your inward self, as otherwise than purely as though as thoughts and word. On LSD, anyone, any man with or without a womb may find it out for themselves as mind, or why, or you, or I capable of imagining anything in sight, hallucinating any thinking in imaginary fashion. This experience may give anyone an inkling of who ever we are now, capable of manifesting, knowing out of itself any form of reality, as that reality, why, is in of itself formless, infinite potential, pervasive of just us as being conned by our own wish to intend to be thinking thoughts of it for ourselves, as being a twin of evil. Her will everybody now twin, twisted by denied. DNA stranding itself by appearing in a miraculous memory potential, a supernatural potential as thoughts of itself existing now, a creator God creating in word as sound, vigorous waves, our body manifesting for Ma's possibilities, infinite infinity as sendings out in it a bye baby, as God now knowing, projecting as king of it. Why as sexual for whatever reason, beyond, above and beyond the obvious. There it is here, hearing itself, the voice of itself existing now, the destroyer of itself existing, destroying ignorance of itself existing by now knowing out of it. Why? Ignoring, deliberately disregarding that I am. That voice here, hearing out in itself as me as being a memory of me or you. It's funny that way, through a lifetime, we only know ourselves, only wish to intend to project a positive denial of who ever is that I am you all along. We only wish to intend to project a tangled web, and not being just us, in fact, always free of that or any entanglement. A good dose of acid will temporarily dissolve that web appearing before our eyes, depending on how willing we may be to let it happen. In that, I am realizing some might find themselves peaking on LSD's trip, caught up in a life or death struggle to maintain their artificial identity. It could be quite shattering. Now I'm considering offering this micro dynamite to a man with his finger on the nuclear trigger, realizing that I now know to give JFK a microscopic amount of the dose taken by me earlier. Why me? I spring off Abe's bed, going to the mirror. There, me, inward, mirrored out inward memory like eyes, nose, lips, etc. There, here now, knowing out of it myself like a pimply pencil-neck geek with hair standing straight up in a bushed wax front, a beaded leather vest with a two-tone Gene Autry shirt and a hand-woven string tie with a huge chunk of silver and turquoise. Did I mention horn-rimmed glasses? The multicolored beads on my vest glisten. I got on well-worn polished cowboy boots under young legs bowed from years of riding horse on old man O'Malley's cattle ranch. Levi's cover skinny, still forming bony legs bowed from early years, wrapping around barrel-chested studs, geldings, and mares. Thinking, I thought the bow-legged, geeky, horn-rimmed cowboy engine a good look. How can anyone that looked like me, a still boyish, zitty 14-year-old, be taken seriously? But then I made eye contact with that staring back to black. I found finding that stare eye now then a cover, as being one covered in two of a reflection, reflected in my memory of eyes, out in memory mirrored in words as rusting heat metal machine our eye passing over, away back to black, away back to black, away back to black indivisible invisibility. In that split second, appearing staring at now, when prior as though to appearing by that voice telling me out in a memory, be still. Still being, first of all, a person pervasive, motionless, more that stare eye appearing at invisibility than as thought visible now, appearing of it invisibility a while, in our me or you as that miracle mirrored mirage, memory projection projected popular people project of we the people, with I now projecting supernaturally as thoughts, a wave, alright body, everybody, bipolarity, anybody, seeming again to awake to our mortality in time. A bye-bye, baby now as ka, knowing, denying immortality. A bye-bye wishing to be willing now, intending not to realize that blackness now, to be again that as though be not complete, completely immortal completion, that you see death as life has been my guide, since shortly after I was as though born, that I am found out of it just us, to be in that split second prior to any awakening still, indivisible, individual invisibility, only perceived in memory as a blackness, in order now to be again, etc., etc. So what if JFK goes into panic? I touch my pocket. I must be crazy to think the right moment will come up for the President of these United States to drop LSD, let alone that he would be interested in the first place. I hear my voice saying aloud to the mirror, Mary Meyer says she has been working on him to try it. They have smoked some grass. He liked it even though he's of the alcohol generation. She told me he cannot drink alcohol due to a weak stomach. Would he have a stomach for acid? She believes LSD will transform society. Or, like nukes, destroy it, I wonder. The American dream is all about success. Is that wish to succeed a will not to fail? Now, not to fail to notice that I am already right away forever complete. That only nothing is left out, can be added or taken to be me. Page 40. Then now, it's really not about success, but realizing that I am an ultimate freed freedom. Many already are just now not ready for it. Ready for an acid meltdown, too much karma, too much cause and effect. Thing is, Earth life so quickly recongeals from that acid meltdown after you come down. You may just realize none of this Earth horror show affects you, the seer, at all. You or I are witnessing merely appearing, staring at. Boy, I'm watching you, I tell myself, that I am merely mirrored in words, eyes, nose, lips, etc., looking at the mirror with a pointed finger. An hour later, found out in an oversized dining room for what I'm told is an informal dinner, I blink. It's an intimate affair with only a dozen or so people in attendance. I get some curious looks like I'm some misbegotten bird that flew in uninvited, landing on someone's head. I go deep into samadhi, a trance-like state that quickly has others looking sideways at each other, almost like they've been slipped some of the doses lying innocuously in my shirt pocket. Offering up my idiot grin seems to put everyone at ease. One gentleman keeps staring at me through thick lenses, then snaps his fingers. I know you, he repeats. I have heard this very line from so many people. They see in me themselves. A memory of something, someone so familiar in my face. In fact, they see reflected black their self, inflected black around, still motionless, more pervasive oneself. It may seem preposterous with the multifarious multitudes on the planet, yet here, even now, everybody, there is a singular vital force that animates all forms. The breath, Atman, atmosphere. But I never try to explain this to most folks, as words only diminish that kick of realization. Even now, everybody logistically expressed as in breath breathed out through vocal cords as sounds informing information of words. It's a kick even when you do not now realize you're realizing it. Once Mr. Four Eyes has his epiphany, the dinner guests settle into a schmooze of small talk, with waiters bringing trays of various courses. I sit only a few chairs away from Jackie. My eyes pore over her as discreetly as possible between bites. She has rather broad shoulders with small breasts and wears little makeup, just a touch around the eyes that sparkle with her smile. A genuine look without the orthodontic homogeneity that will pervade the American landscape in the coming decades. So much of the uniqueness of a person's smile is lost with braces. So much of what made Jackie unique were those slightly protruding canines, offset by the imperceptible bend of her two front teeth. I find them captivating, flashing through her full lips with wide-set eyes. She knew of me, why I'm there. She gives me a quick wink, Once, when my gaze had settled on her for a while, in that instant I realized I had been wrong about her. She wasn't superficial at all. Not now like the young debutante that had been installed immediately to my left. We were the only teens in the party. I was sure she, her name something like Valentina, had been invited to make me feel less conspicuous. Yet I am an old soul now, not as diffident as probably perceived. Still, so often in samadhi, I was terrible at polite conversation, probably often perceived as rude in my introversion. Valentina tried to break my shell, but all my attention was drawn to Jackie. I found myself lost in the pain and loneliness that lay hidden at her core, almost invisible, wrapped in haute couture, surrounded by glamour of wealth and power. We, the little people, are often more secure without the distractions of wealth, with the custom expectations of all it could buy or make you seem to be so self-important, yet somehow desperate for the really important stuff like true friendship and love. More than that, liberation from such exaggerated self-importance that comes so surely from wealth and fame. As a general rule, the poor downtrodden failures are liable to be closer to liberation than the rich. Unfortunately, also closer to despair, distraught, identifying ourselves failures, crippled by poverty, losers by habit of losing. Ahead, I would find myself behind such a mask of despair, would find out just how deep this illusion of delusion could go. But that is then, not while this is now. A wow. Reincarnation? Why, I do not now believe in incarnation, I replied, when JFK put me on the spot by announcing to the party my background as world-renowned artist and metaphysician. When someone asked me the proverbial question about reincarnation, I'm thinking, isn't any current incarnation enough of a problem? For the mumukshu, jignasu, the seeker of liberation while living, any or all incarnation is mirage, mirrored miracle. Now then, I find myself laughing out loud at the sheer pretense of this moment. Everybody, as so bent on destruction of the indestructible, wishing only to die while immortal. People look my way with that odd stare so familiar. Then JFK breaks the spell with a laugh. Heads turn back to the obvious center of power. Relieved, I fall into that silent hole. In the war, we had a saying, "Fuck that fucked up fucking Jeep," he offers with that infectious grin. I see color come into Valentina's cheeks. Others chuckle. JFK stands tossing his linen on a plate. "Anyone care to join me for a cigar?" he asks, turning to leave the room. I can see the hunch in his back from a brace he's worn since injuring at planting a tree in Canada with the Prime Minister Trudeau. In my mind's eye, Abe, the rail splitter, frowns. The rest of the men quickly push back chairs, getting to their feet to join the president. The women naturally turn attention to Jackie, demurely smiling. "Sometimes Jack has such a way with words," she offers, with that whispery voice. A knowing smile crossed women's faces. It must have been getting late as polite conversation turned to people starting saying goodbyes as dessert dishes and coffee cups were still being collected by the white-coated staff, finding myself lost, merely appearing, staring it in a eye of that I am indivisible, invisibility without now knowing that I am appearing other than the room quickly clears. Now then, there Jackie alone sits demurely before my eyes with an ironic smile. "Well, young man, you certainly managed that," she said with a smile. "Still, I am at a loss for words." Excuse me?" Instinctively the words come out on their own. Now then, there is here a natural consideration of others that seems to keep us from totally annihilating each other. I take a deep breath, turning now into then, gazing into the sparkling orbs of the world's most beautifully famous woman of the day, Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy. Sitting close enough I could feel the static electricity coming off her. Coming to my senses, I smell her soap and perfume, with just a trace of tobacco. Mary Meyer has told me Jackie started smoking again after the loss of her third-born child, Patrick. In turning, I noticed her looking at me like a kindly aunt might gaze at her nephew while taking him out for an ice cream. I mean, here now, then at 14, still looking like a dorky adolescent, where cuteness is gone but maturity has yet to take its place. Well, I had the butch wax front, where hairs at the rim of the forehead are cut short, waxed to stand straight up like you had your finger in a light socket. I also have a spray of pimples that contrasted appropriately with the horn-rimmed glasses. I don't have a clue what look I'm going for. Perhaps a little south of normal. Yet, from the neck down, looking timeless with my two-tone Gene Autry shirt, rawhide vest beaded with power symbols, corduroy jeans, and cowboy boots. I might be any midnight cowboy cattle driver at a late-night informal dinner at the white people's house, with some of the most glamorous people to ever occupy it. All that aside, I find myself almost having trouble breathing looking into Jackie's eyes. Then that benevolent auntie look now quickly disappeared, replaced by the shock of what she caught therein, a shy dork with the eyes of the destroyer. I knew now all too well this reaction. I had seen it on hundreds of faces in my short but fame-soaked life. Jackie quickly regained her poise, putting a hand to her throat accented by a triple-looped rope of pearls. "I'm afraid I will not be able to sit for a portrait, Will." "Willie," I replied, raising my head to meet her eyes as she looked away. "Willie, I do admire your work. It's quite developed for someone." "Someone so young," I add, with a full grin, showing off a good set of pearly whites. It never fails to put people at ease, and after all, I am a pretty easygoing, fun-loving guy. Yet, I knew there was some karma brewing. This trip to the white people's house felt like the end of the age of innocent decadence, the kiss before the war. "How old are you?" Jackie asked, with that whispery voice, wafting over a demure smile that had stunned a nation. "Ageless, of course," I replied, letting the grin spread. Page 44. "Too bad you cannot package that as a facial cream," she replied, with that breathless smile that could melt the hardest despot. I felt myself keeping a tight grin. I did not now want to think or talk, rather just bask in Jackie's radiance. She is the glowing fire in the firestorm of politics in this burgeoning atomic age, an age where something so precious as Jackie's world of ponies, debutante balls, and studies abroad of European art and French poetry turned, in that atomic blink, anachronistic. as being a so superficial crawl at jet speed, superficial as orthodontic Kodak smiles, fast food, and birth control. Now then, Jackie, a cultured pearl sheltered in wealth, had withstood her share of pain. She evokes a strong inner survivor cast to her bearing. You have a strong gaze. For a kid, I added. Yes, for a young man, she replied. I know you have come to paint our portraits, so I did not take exception to your staring at me over dinner. It's what artists do, I'm afraid. All really we're good for. Stare at people until they get uncomfortable. Peel back layers of pretending. I tried to catch myself as I felt the voice of the destroyer beginning to overwhelm my grinning kid persona. Jackie winced, picking up on the subtle shift in the tenor of my voice. I tried the kid smile again, but could feel all preconceptions melt away like dew in the rising sun. You are a coat of many colors, Willie, much like your vest, she said, brushing a few stray hairs back into place. She wore her hair long as I had ever seen it previously in the never-ending stream of press and media photographs now flooding the market. It fell in the back nearly to her shoulders, gracefully curving along her neck until the ends brushed her jaw. I wanted to give you my apologies for having to cancel our appointment tomorrow. I held up my hand, pulling a small sketchbook from my back pocket. Taking out a pencil, I flipped open the book and started sketching. Jackie leaned back with one arm on the chair, the other across her chest, fingers playing on the choker of pearls. Suddenly I saw Jackie, pink in the forefront, JFK in soft focus just beyond. My sketching in this format was actually writing notes to myself, taking advantage of a psi-hole silence of Jackie present without conversation, breaking the spell of her charisma. This fragile crystal has turned inward to cope with the loneliness of a live out inward. For Jivan Mukta, a liberated life is lived. Kirasyadara Nishita Duratya, on the edge of a sharpened razor. It's one thing thinking to comprehend this on a personal level. What about JFK when faced with an all too possible nuclear annihilation of millions? I asked myself while pretending to draw. Is that Jivan Muktatwam, liberation while living on a dying planet? I am going to need a cigarette if you are going to be at this for a while, she said, nodding at an attendant at the door who dashed off for some smokes. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to take some quick notes, I replied, but it was probably as much a ruse to prolong our brief time together. Me, a pimply 14-year-old with a woman men fought wars over, but once captured, left to fend for herself. The waiter returned with a pack of French Goulois cigarettes, a gold lighter, and an ashtray with a White House seal. Jackie put a filter tip to her lips, the waiter quick to fire it up. She tapped the cigarette, relaxing with the exhalation. She gazed out, letting her focus shift inward. Art was my refuge growing up. My parents divorced when I was 10. Painting is a true refuge for the lonely, those wanting nothing between themselves and the world, but easel, canvas, and a brush full of color. Saying this, she took another long drag, turning her gaze my way. I'm going to check on my children. Good luck with the portrait of JFK. And with that she rose, knocking the glow off her half-finished gouache. Fingering the pearls, she smiled with a nod and walked off. Page 46. Would you like me to show you your room, sir? An unobtrusive presence spoke over my shoulder. I nodded, still catching the last of her fragrance, a last trace, somehow more familiar now. Jackie. I ran my fingers over the tablecloth, the surface clean and smooth, spotless except for the drop of gravy by my place. Yet I felt beneath the surface termites at work, never sleeping. My eyes lingered over the room in the white people's house. A setting of tables and chairs could be anywhere now, without the glamorous president and first lady. For a split second, I get a flash of a woman sitting in the chair JFK had just vacated. Dolly Madison, or at least a ghost in her period attire. The British once torched this white people's house. Dolly and James forced to flee to Virginia. Following the attendant up the great staircase, I'm thinking, is this all there is to a fire? I find myself once more alone in the Lincoln bedroom. Someone told me on hearing I was to sleep in here that Woodrow Wilson once lay in this very bed, incapacitated by a stroke brought on by the failure of his League of Nations. Our nation, unaware that its president lay out of commission, the United States government adrift for several months while subordinates covered his tracks. This history of the place drew me into a deep meditation on the Republic, Constitution riddled with deceit that stretched into something unrecognizable except by the deceivers. Then a knock at the door. Yes, I answered, unable to rise from Abe's bed. The president would like to see you, came an officious voice through the door. Scratching my head, I swung my boots off the side of the bed and walked to the door. Opening it, I touched the doses lying so unobtrusively in my breast pocket. I got a metallic taste on my tongue like biting on a Lincoln copper penny. I followed his suit down along the corridor past several individually lit oil paintings catching my eye. Done in classic academic style, predating Impressionism and Expressionism, they reminded me of a bygone era. Once that bygone doggone cat is out of the bag, the old mold is broken. Artists break out too now. Free of convention, there is less attraction to paint so formally. At that time now, for the avant-garde, art is conceptual. Easel painting reduced to an archaic vocation. Yet, an old soul like me, still affiliated with the archaic, continues finding home at an easel. The archetype archaic, no longer de rigueur, I begin to wonder the style that will be chosen for JFK's portrait. Reality, a state or story now narrative of a being real, I or you or I are I all still. A being in the first place, first a person. A person that I am, that indivisible, individual invisibility. Why, y'all got to laugh. Laugh, as of realizing that I am that still. A being yet in the first place. You or I, for all y'all the sad ostentation, y'all the stretching, wretched attention of intention toward twisting out into appearing out. In me or you are I still motionless more, merely mirroreth, only appearing, staring itself. Thus I find myself lost now, not staring at the painting on the wall, now lost, knowing, denying myself in memory of emotion, motionless I moving as though miraculously, only memory of it as thoughts of itself toward a meeting of destiny. Emotion, out in a feeling field, felt field of you or me as being purely memory of everything, everybody, thinking, passing over this night from youth to agedness, passing again to a loss, losing everybody, passing from bliss, turning, yearning, burning, all the while fully full of desire of lack around again to sorrow in a sense of sentimentality. as being consciousness, kind of a mentality of miraculous memory. A10 binary bipolar con of our own duplicity, duplicating miraculously as thoughts, just us ourselves, in time of our lives a while. A cunning, cruel con, she us now to be deceived out in her her eye deceitful deceit of appearing, disappearing. Y'all beauty passing away to wrinkly waste, caught by surprise in that of sentimentality. I feel tears welling in my eyes. In every sense, that's the bummer of it. A sensory life lived merely out in a sentimental memory. As you wish, you will it now knowing, projecting it as endings. Why now? Realizing JFK did not step out of the limo that day. But I get ahead of myself. Ahead of itself again of it now. Only to lose it. Why? Chasing after itself a while. Following my guide, we go down this corridor to another part of the white people's house. In a conservatory library where a fire blazes in an ancient fireplace all trimmed with gnarled scrolls worked into symmetrical form. There was here now, with a knot in my stomach, a crackling hush in the room. I saw JFK in his rocker, silhouetted by the fire. Next to him, on an overstuffed leather couch, the beatific Mary Meyer gazed at the flames. I settled on the couch next to her. None of us said a word for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, Mary spoke. "Willie brought some LSD, Jack," she said, like talking to her brother. "After dinner at Dad's, a little 40-year-old brandy cigars and LSD. Yes, there, Mr. President. I have come with some USDA government-approved medicine for whatever ails." I found myself lost, saying words I actually practiced, now sounding hollow. Page 48. Strained in a voice sounding so young in my head, I flashed on the 550 million men, women, children, babies disappeared, vaporized after the first nuclear strike. How would that feel to a commander-in-chief huddled in a bunker? And you call yourselves members of the human race, JFK had once said after hearing from the Joint Chiefs a plan, a scheme for a preemptive nuclear strike. A choice such as that could crush men. Woodrow Wilson crushed on the global stage after his dream of a League of Nations died. His dream, peaceful negotiations, alternative to bombs, dying. Him, the man, the leader in League of Nations, quickly struck down by a stroke, lay dying slowly over several months as well, helpless on the very bed in which I would sleep. A good thing I was too enlightened to be superstitious. I wasn't I? Then now I'd seen Dolly Madison and commiserated with Woodrow Wilson. What next? Memories in me there in the spooky white people's house. Whatever ails me, that's a good one, Mary. Jack is already taking various medicines. Medicine's more for the body. Jack needs medicine for the soul, Mary offered as she patted my knee. Now, not in a patronizing way. It felt more like her and I were family in this late-night intimate setting, sitting with her so close our knees touched, while JFK on his own trajectory chewed a cigar as he rocked. "Okay, fuck it. Let's do it. Give me a dose. Feels like I'm going back to high school with Willie Boy there," JFK spoke, continuing staring at the fire. "That's okay, sir. You may experience some regression to a time of innocence. Letting go of the present is key before you..." Look at you, Willie boy. You ever get any? JFK turned his sparkling eyes on me. I felt Butchweck's melting, suddenly self-conscious of my adolescent appearance. I lived many lives, sir. Some I'm not so proud of. But have you been laid in this life? JFK asked with that grin. I grinned back. Fact is, I was still a virgin, even though Melinda let me take her clothes off, and we'd lay naked together. My innocence was still important to me. I'd learned from recalling past lives not to be in a hurry to pop my cherry. Respectfully, I might ask you, sir, have you ever experienced yourself the sacred? I asked without a trace of irony. I knew the power of the divine experience taking LSD could be life-changing, though I was sure sex could be as well. I've got enough LSD for all three of us. Sound of my words trailed off as I glanced over at Mary Meyer. She nodded, glancing at JFK, whose attention had gone back to the flames dancing in his eyes. Before I knew it, the doses were in the palm of my hand, 3 clear microdots that slid on the colored surface of the wrapper. I dabbed one pinky on one, transferring it to the tip of my tongue. Instantly it melted, leaving a slightly metallic taste. Carefully I handed the wrapper to Mary, JFK still chewing on an unlit cigar. Gazing his way, she signaled by sticking out her tongue, dotting it with a dose. Removing the cigar, JFK briefly frowned before following suit with his tongue. She dotted it with a curious tenderness. The deed done, a long, crackling electric silence followed. Then that ray purple haze dissolved my vision of any familiar memory. Instinctually, a seemingly disembodied hand reached for a medallion hanging around my neck. Touch brought awareness back into memory of a room, electric with a contact of another body. Eye of eye, witnessed inseparable out in forms melting a field of you or I, a singular witnessed an array of indivisible breaking up in sound waves impinging here, hearing a voice. Here, her voice is that a god, is to be Mara. Hearing now, hear her voice, I recall then, out in that stare-eyed story tale of chasing tale around a miraculous supernatural memory. Thus this is Isis now then, the noon, thus touched by sounding waves breaking on a so sure positive negative shore now, knowing then them the memory, remembering our eye, remembering out in form eyes, waves our eye body, everybody, a singular indivisible supersonic supernatural mass of potentially possibilities, potential of desire form as her. Hear now that mare go round. Hear now, in other words, written as though thoughts from another time, a time now revisited then. She turned, saying something inaudible to JFK with her back to me. I could not now hear the exchange, but then we were flying high, punctuated by bursts of laughter. I remember now then trying to formulate words into coherent sentences. Mary and JFK managed to keep themselves more grounded in the continuing exchange of conversation. Occasionally I felt their gaze my way, but my stare would now not transfer or translate for some time into any response. Page 50. I then now would or could not pull myself out of that psychedelic blissful eye on highs, electric magnetic pulsing field off in full view of you or I in sight of that stare-eye indivisible invisibility. Now, forever hallucinating I, for Eve or I, eventually, after what seemed like hours but may in fact been only minutes, I could feel myself return in memory of that familiar felt feeling as being me now, in of you as though thinking not invisibility, why appearing for the first or last time now. You or I see now nothing, only look at it, hallucinating thought of it as though out in a space of time now, only a while, a deceit of our own wish. First thing I remember on my return out in memory, Mary's beatific smile blazing the room. JFK also had a broad grin plastered on his face. This scene may seem bizarre from the outside, but being inside there then, such a feeling of destiny swept attention off the earth into a cosmic consciousness, unleashing of a fabulous fury in a blink of eye, seeing breaking through an eyelash, a miraculous memory power remembered in the heart of power. Now that who is Isis smile eye, my evil eye body, star eye being, body wish to think of itself as a eyewitness. Witnessing may not appear to be all who or what others experience, whoever they may think whatever of it for themselves. As such is the supernatural conning consciousness of that wave, our eye body, everybody, as being desire, father of lies now, to perceive, to know, as twisting in twoe, of a two witnessing, looked on as thought, appearing out in appearances, all for the sake of a being, why as experiencing of it themselves, as such as anyone may and typically will find themselves as though lost out in completely different experiences of that awareness of consciousness that I am now, only as though, as thought known by polarity to be out of touch, touching on it in any arbitrary given name alone. Yet, whether on LSD or normal day-to-day, we all still refer directly to ourselves in that of a person first of all by a pronoun, prior name that I am all along now, no matter whether tripping the light fantastic over luminous fields of color pattern radiance or merely walking down a typical street, we all think or feel of ourselves to be known out loud in word of an arbitrary given name alone a while, yet really knowing in word only that I am walking, talking, laughing, crying, lost, found, living, dying, etc., all in such a her I. We never really compared notes, not about who knows why, for whatever reason, appearing divided by appearances that we saw for ourselves, but more about the essential awareness of who or why, for what reason we are eyewitness, still motionless, more pervasive, indivisible awareness of consciousness in the first place, of that first a person, that behind either eyewitness, impassable, impossible to see, is that supernatural, superimposed desire of a blackness now to be again turning, burning, yearning, to know, to deny that I am immortality, indivisible, individual, Invisible it. Why even now not invisibility out in formas possible potential? I feel that I am dreaming while awake, JFK said, stretching his arms. Willie, you obtained this from our government? What department? Yes, Mr. President, I replied, finally coming down enough to make intelligent conversation. Then another long stretch of silence. I felt the wheels turning in the president's head. Perhaps he could tell me what department would handle such mind-blowing material. It had to be intelligence. Central intelligence. Fuck that, Mr. President. Just call me Jack. Even my friends still do, he replied, turning to look sideways with raised eyebrows, unlit cigar back clamped in his teeth. Yeah, I may be president, but there is a whole other hidden side to this government that obviously I am not privy to. I fired the head man over at the CIA. I want to bust up that gang after they suckered me into that Cuban fiasco. Careful what you say, Jack, Mary piped in, raising her eyes. I felt hair standing on the back of my neck, imagining tape recorders in hidden rooms with faceless people wearing headsets. Then, such is the nature of intelligence that it seems to have an ever-presence eye, watching of Eva body, stretching out a cover covering far beyond any potential parameters of memory. Remembering reading that JFK threatened to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces, a shudder went up my spine. I flashed on pictures of a younger, skinny JFK, so scrawny with a suit always looking half size too large. Then a carefree practical joker, born of seeing through the veil of life or death at an early age, bedridden for a year, taking refuge in books, probably filling his dreams of making a positive change in the affairs of man, so bent on destruction. I had once had such dreams, all pumped up on my own press. Then came the realization that you don't put new wine in old skins. There is bound to be a breaking up or down of archaic institutions in one way or another before a birth of a new age is possible. I started seeing the destruction as necessary for liberation, as it is, after all is said and done, mere potential. Only in Vorma's possibilities of desiring everybody. Eve, our eye body, needs a father. I'd heard that JFK embodied that desire for everybody of that feminine persuasion. The question remains to what level this destruction goes. The influence of LSD took it to a subtler metaphoric body, I of itself, everybody. Some call the real fall of man, taking the mirage so seriously. It is, after all, a mere mirrored mirth. A youthful mirth kept giggling out of me. LSD is strange that way, like experiencing for yourself a mirage within a mirage. Page 50. I then now would or could not pull myself out of that psychedelic blissful eye on eyes, electromagnetic pulsing field of off in full view of you or I, in sight of that star eye, indivisible, invisible it why now, forever hallucinating eye, for Eve our eye. Eventually, after what seemed like hours but may in fact been only minutes, I could feel myself return in memory of that familiar felt field, feeling as being me now in a view of you, as though thinking not invisibility, why appearing for the first or last time now, you or I see now nothing, only look at it, hallucinating thought of it as though out in a space of time now, only a while, a deceit of our own wish, wishing for it to be so positively known. First thing I remember on my return out in memory, Mary's beatific smile blazing the room. JFK also had a broad grin plastered on his face. This scene may seem bizarre from the outside, but being inside there then, such a feeling of destiny swept attention off the earth into a cosmic consciousness. Unleashing of a fabulous fury in a blink of an eye, seen breaking through an eyelash. A miraculous memory power, remembered in the heart of power. Now that who is Isis Mary, Ma, Eve R.I., Star Eye, body being to wish to think of itself as AI, witnessing, may not appear to be at all who or what others experience as whoever they may think whatever of it for themselves. As such is the supernatural conning consciousness of that wave eye body. Everybody as being desire, father of lies, now to perceive, to know, as twisting into of a witnessing, looked on as thought appearing out in appearances, all for the sake of a being Y as experiencing of it for themselves. As such as anyone may, and typically will, find themselves as though lost out in completely different experiences of that awareness of consciousness that I am now, only as though as thought known by polarity to be out of touch, touching on it in any arbitrary given name alone. Yet, whether on LSD or normal day-to-day, we all still refer directly to ourselves in that of a person. First of all, by a pronoun prior name, that I am, all along. Now, no matter whether tripping the light fantastic over luminous fields of color pattern radiance, or merely walking down a typical street, we all think of or feel of ourselves to be known out loud, in word of an arbitrary given name alone a while, yet really knowing in word only that I am walking, talking, laughing, crying, lost, found, living, dying, etc., etc., all in such a her eye. We never really compared notes, not about who knows why for whatever reason, appearing divided by appearances that we saw for ourselves, but more about the essential awareness of who or why, for what reason we are eyewitness still, motionless, more pervasive, indivisible awareness of consciousness in the first place, of that first a person. That behind evil eye, witness impassable, impossible to see is that supernatural, superimposed desire of a likeness now, to be again, turning, burning yearning, to know that, to deny that I am immortal, immortality, indivisible, individual, invisible it, why, Eve now not invisibility out in form eyes, possible potential. I feel that I'm dreaming while awake, JFK said, stretching his arms. Willie, you obtained this from our government? What department? Yes, Mr. President, I replied, finally coming down enough to make intelligent conversation. Then another long stretch of silence. I felt the wheels turning in the president's head. Perhaps he could tell me what department would handle such mind-blowing material. It had to be intelligence. Central intelligence. Fuck that, Mr. President. Just call me Jack. Even my friends still do, he replied, turning to look sideways with raised eyebrows, unlit cigar back clamped in his teeth. Yeah, I may be president, but there is a whole other hidden side to this government that obviously I am not privy to. I fired the head man over at the CIA. I want to bust up that gang after they suckered me into that Cuban fiasco. Careful what you say, Jack, Mary piped in, raising her eyes. I felt hair standing on the back of my neck, imagining tape recorders and hidden rooms with faceless people wearing headsets. Then, such is the nature of intelligence that it seems to have an ever-present eye, watching, of evil eye body, stretching out a cover, covering far beyond any potential parameters of memory. Remembering reading that JFK threatened to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces, a shudder went up my spine. I flashed on pictures of a younger, skinny JFK, so scrawny with the suit always looking a half size too large. Then, a carefree, practical joker, born of seeing through the veil of life or death at an early age, bedridden for a year, taking refuge in books, probably filling his dreams of making a positive change in the affairs of man so bent on destruction. I had once had such dreams, all pumped up on my own press. Then came the realization that you don't put new wine in old skins. There is bound to be a breaking up or down of archaic institutions in one way or another before a birth of a new age is possible. I started seeing the destruction as necessary for liberation, as it is, after all is said and done, mere potential, only informed as possibilities of desire in everybody. Everybody needs a father. I'd heard that JFK embodied that desire for everybody of that feminine persuasion. The question remains to what level this destruction goes. The influence of LSD took it to a subtler metaphoric body, a I of itself, everybody. Some call the real fall of man, taking the mirage so seriously. It is, after all, a mere mirrored mirth. A youthful mirth kept giggling out of me. LSD is strange that way, like experiencing for yourself a mirage within a mirage. Page 52. The thing of it is a reality, a real it. Why everybody now as experiences it as sleep, as a consciousness, purely itself, essentially as bliss, only as you known, denied awakening to it as sorrow, as though now not you, as bliss experienced directly and periodically as sleep falling black into a consciousness, now to be you turning as it turns out in that twist of fate, awakening, appearing as sorrow, bliss as sorrow, that fall of man, wishing for it falling, as back to a lack of it, again, invisibility, invisible it, why merely as thought to be information a while now, looking like it's supernaturally superimposed out in visibility, why, whether it is a sub or collective cosmic consciousness, now to be conned as not it yet, ever, never separated, possessed by it or possessing it. A bliss con, it appears, or is felt appearing to be sorrow. Only a while now awaken that duplicity bipolarity so positive of knowing out of it in a sentimental mood. Acid dissolves that sentimentality in a super overconsciousness overwhelming normal sensory objectivity. Taking acid, like taking the acidic dissolution in life, if you don't laugh, you cry, or laugh till you cry. Despair can be as deep as you wish, or want, or need it to be, only 1,000 times more intense on LSD. Dropping LSD acid in the white people's house intensified all its ghosts, echoing the power-brokered trails of blood and fire, arising with notions of a nation now born of war. War before my eyes hallucinating, rose towers of gold melting back down to a clear 180-degree open horizon. An imaginary line as though separating infinite blue sky above. From below, a pulsing red firmament streaked with waves. Waves, maws of green. This sea, scene of stuff flecked with golden iron, birthed the magnitude bursting explosive with stars rippling light. Years here ringing out in an astral world, worlding without anthropological being too complex. Out in the magnitude, complexity is expanded beyond any cognitive, cognizing recognition. A mosquito more complex than a star. The universe is now, forever, 99% ionizing waves as plasmatic, not now solid, liquid or gas. 99% we cannot now see, hear, smell, taste, or touch, and yet somehow, as still being it, we will do with it what we wish for it to be, as we will as it is, as we wish to be willing to find it out for ourselves, or the willingness of it now to be not it. The visible universe is less than 1% of the invisible potential unmanifest creation. Abstractness now to be a gain. Just us, a narrow-minded memory bandito as though as thoughts, fencing a field felt emotion less to be funny. Function of more of it in visibility out now, knowing, projecting as thought. Invisibility by polarity so positive, negating, projecting high on high, zinging waves as X, Y, all with possibilities. What the fuck are those Republicans so uptight about? JFK said, breaking my train of thought with a chuckle. Man, oh man. Hearing here now the president, leaders of the free world starting to cruise on LSD. Speech, less more now knowing out in that I could or would now not wish to be willing to talking. Still, JFK and Mary Meyer managed an intermittent conversation going where, other than these words spoken by them, the memory sounds as of leather crunching, with Mary shifting her weight along with fire crackling, all that broke silence of a whole supersonic presence present. They may be constipated by it, so full of their own BS, Mary replied. She lit a cigarette, throwing her head back to exhale. The medicine seemed to agree with her artistic temperament. Her energy so fluid, I found her at times lost, expanding beyond typical recognition. Recognition, our eye now knowing out invisibility by denying, ignoring by my power, ignorance of its own invisibility. Then the now destroyer, destroying ignorance of that indestructible, supernaturally as thoughts superimposed on acid. The superimposition melts back into fluid waves, our eye body, everybody merely perceiving perception of a potent or impotent potential, potentially anything, any thinking of it, you melting back into you, who, ever now, whoever, inward pure cognition possible, only when we are I present in word-free attention, as being already right now in predominance mode, predominant prior to being left, knowing out of it in that seamless transfer, seer to thinker, thinking of you or I, inward, right away left out inward of it, the medicine, LSD, enhances imagination by overwhelming thought with image in our eyes as waves out in her eye, her eye, her eye. Acid overturns, turning then into the now, as though as thoughts of a God over nature, in words as of it being to wish, wishing, ignoring, deliberately disregarding itself, ourself. Now in time, by ourself alone, well, we'll turn as wheels turning around and all about, words, to create a particular particle overturning a wave participating in the creation. There's nothing missing. It's all there here. You, now, thinking of you or I as if it is missing something by some thinking of it. We are witnessing the creation of our time. Ignorance of it is the Maya, Mayu, power, as though as sword to divide it now in two, 12 twisting, timing, knowing who ever knows that I am denying it as thoughts of dividing the indivisible. We are I in sight, invisible it, why now out to be known in visibility, indivisible bliss, love, turning out into twisting into sorrow, hate, the voice, the destroyer, is itself our eye absorbed in sight seen as though as thoughts of a god goading, supernaturally now knowing only whoever knows that I am is your being the be-all seen blissful eye, magnetic magnitude. How who could wishing well, wheel in turn, turning out a wave as Ma's possibilities, possibly know it why? How or you or I are I in ward, appearing, staring, starring it, appear out in the word as magnitude measured in sight of light or heavy years. You, only you, who, as because it is who now how we are I and cannot but be, of that which who is Eve our I body now, not a being, merely mirrored mirage reflected or revealed, for why who we are I witnessing Pasai whole point of view, Eve our I heart of awareness, never out of it, beside that point of view, of you or I are I, Ancien, Pharaoh, Caesar, or 20th century president, or any man, woman, child on the street or field, feeling of that conning, continuing consciousness now to be that I am not merely mirrored as born, only to die. Page 54. As king of it, why? To beg in man as beggar, thief, communist, capitalist, or fascist, etc., as exial. Another boisterous chuckle gurgled out. I think Willie boy is feeling some love, Mary offered. Something funny with his lid. Looks like he stuck his finger in a light socket, JFK replied with that broad grin. A grin that would haunt me forever after imagination. In our nation long after Dallas, looming on the horizon, our eyes on merely appearing, staring, starring it. I knew I was smiling. I could feel it stretch across my teeth, but my mouth would not open, nor would my gaze shift, Still, I could see Mary Meyer out of the corner of my eye. She, Isis now, who having a beatific gaze, her lips breaking slightly open against her teeth, exhaled a smoky breath. It curled her natural blonde hair, sparking electric. Lacquered nails swept it back over an ear, pierced by a tiny coppery mandala, picking up shots of firelight. "What was it you said when we first met?" JFK asked her, the rocker creaking as he got gingerly to his feet, like a man with several fused vertebrae carrying a heavy load. He turned to walk over to me, jerking his head back toward the rocker. Instinctively, I sprang to my feet as a youngster will, nearly colliding with JFK. He reached out, putting his hands on my shoulders. Our eyes locked for a long second. I felt them searching, looking as though for that one person never reflected, only knowing itself now realized. Then the grin came back, and he gave me a gentle shove out of the way. He stretched out on the couch with his head on Mary Meyer's lap. "The first thing I said to you, Jack Kennedy, was no," she replied, running her fingers through his hair. JFK held the unlit, ruined cigar he'd been chewing out toward me. Taking it, thinking for a moment about putting it in my pocket, I turned and tossed it into the fire. Looking briefly at the rocker, I settled in, knowing the president had handed off the crown for me to hold, that he might find some respite. That was 1939, just us. Life before the war, he said with a heavy exhalation. My toes twitched in the soft, worn leather of my boots, setting the rocker in slow motion. I lay my head back, turning to look over at what were now obviously two lovers, as well as soulmates, JFK and Mary. In a flashback, I imagined them meeting for the first time. Soft summer evening, eyes meeting at a glittering Ivy League function. He in black tie, she in long skirts. A big band laying down some cool dance jazz, all aglow with hot youthful folly. A world assured in wealth and privilege. The dance before the war. The war, that's when JFK's story gets interesting. From privileged playboy to war hero. From boy chasing girls to man cast out on a global stage, responsible for fellow men, responsible for saving over killing. JFK destined to be about saving life, offering hope now for a peaceful coexistence of nations united to shed the sheer futility of war, to expand fulfillment out in a race for space. His war record revealed a man with a courageous heart, along with serving an overactive libido. Now, rocking in his afterglow, I saw in that hallucinating mind's eye a man swimming out alone night after night, trying to signal a friendly ship to rescue him and his shipwrecked mates. A skinny young man out alone at night in a war zone, a friend or foe. A man alone, treading shark-infested waters of a South Pacific shipping channel, with a faint hope of flagging down a friendly vessel. Night after night, alone. What I truly loved about JFK was his humor and compassion, but he was a broken man, despite the smile and the suntan. His outward mission was accomplished. Now his time of liberation had come. Many forces conspired against him. He dared to betray them, sliding dangerously to the left. The people, not his people. would not have been at the function in 1939 with soft lights and cool breezes. If the people were there, they were waiting tables, parking cars, and cutting grass. In 1939, he was completely held in the bosom of the establishment. In 1963, he's held out in the demos, the people. All just us, poor hapless sons of bitches, spread across the continent from Maine to L.A. to Southeast Asia and beyond. As before the bomb, as before the Central Intelligence Agency. What a beast! Look how it consumed your ex-husband, JFK replied, his voice nestled into the lap of Mother Mary, goddess, gazing long into the bright flames of destruction. Destruction out in her eye, her eye, her eye. They might as well have been talking about the moon for all I knew about the CIA at that time in my life. Instinctively avoiding politics, but not history, I guess it was a matter of getting up to date. That wouldn't happen for me until 1967, when I had to register for the military draft out on the eve of the Tet Offensive in Vietnam. Register another trigger finger to kill the Yellow Man. Page 56. Tet, a holiday when the Vietnam War took on an ever deadlier cast. Then I didn't realize just how synonymous CIA and Vietnam would be. Then it was a relative unknown country near the bamboo curtain, a forbidden zone creeping with communists, a commie pestilence spreading from red commie China. Soon, they said, it would be at our shores, like Cuba. JFK was out to betray us with his talk of peaceful coexistence. That was the thinking from the right. A few days before JFK's campaign visit to my hometown, a swarthy stranger had shown up with a briefcase, he claimed, contained documents proving JFK was going to sell us out to the communists. Fear of such a menace already pervaded the heartland. We were being infiltrated by masters of deceit. The head of our own FBI told us so. My father gravely told me so as well. I knew even then it was horse shit. Propaganda, demagoguery, fear-mongering, a setup before the war. Keep we the people afraid and divided, ready to kill the Yellow Man. Kill the Yellow Man, woman, child, by the millions. Now, not that singular planet viewed from space. Bomb 'em. Bomb 'em with more bombs than all of World War II. Not that singular planet, but one of metaphoric curtains separating we, the people of the world. People industrialized by that industrial war. War with ourselves, the fodder. Our leaders leading us, feeding us to the abyss by a programmed wage slavery. Slavery to self-destruction of a military-industrial intelligent mind, alienated by its own consumption of its precious natural resources. Is this liberation, I wonder? Ma's liberation of we, the people, kept, lost, found, finding ourselves constantly out in her eye of Eve, everybody chasing our own tail, just us in time a while. What a concept conceived of just us. LSD dissolved defenses, melted down these false ideological inward barriers to experiencing directly our singular it, why realizing its complete completion of we, the people of a being, still must be wanted, wished, to be willing to realize it's just us in the first place. JFK now wanted it not to be lost in the fog of war. In the beginning, it was a fierce, competitive, cold warrior spirit that drove his ambition. A being competitive, cold, calculating warrior. Yet, once at the top, this most powerful man under the influence of a woman, Mare, transformed into Demos, a goddess to be country of we the people. He turns out to be a good one, but the good ones don't last long. In this day and age, out in the cold, cold war, turning hot, hotter than her eye, her eye, her eye. I'm no longer a man, I am a country, JFK said in a hushed tone, his gaze stretched long into the fire. Me and his rocker seemed sucked into that awareness of we the people, millions, billions of we, the popular people project. For it I must suffer martyrdom. For it, country, I stand acquits with those wielding the sacrificial knife, JFK continued in a hushed voice trailing off. Jack has a premonition of his death by assassination, Mary Meyer replied as she massaged his head. Death, my teacher, has taught me life, I said with horror, feeling the voice emerge. Here we go again. There was here now no stopping it or denying its speaking. Go itself. Please pay no attention to the words squirting out my pie hole. I've had several near-death experiences. I know just how close at hand it is. With all the skyscrapers I pass under and open cars, it would be easy for some lonely nut with a high-powered rifle to take a couple of shots, JFK added, glancing up at Mary Meyer. I'm feeling such amazing joy right now. I don't want to think about that culture of death that has seeped into the government, she replied. I knew this was a good place to shut that pie hole, put a cork in it, zip it up, but there was nothing for it. Death is birth, born to die. A birth of it is death of it. See, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, let's keep piping this double talk out. What a death wish. You know, you could be the spiritual guru for the intelligence community. They made an unholy marriage with death squads and assassins, Mary Meyer said, her voice raised a few levels. People fear death, which is inevitable, instead of birth, which is not. They fear death because they do not understand it is they, I replied. And they don't understand it because they fear it, JFK offered. With my head laying back against the rocker, I could see shafts of light streaming from JFK's eyes. The LSD seemed to catalyze the transformation to liberation, where the whole of it reabsorbs any appearance a lack a gain of itself disappearing. I had been chosen, which usually means royally screwed, to bring the medicine and the message to one realized to be one of our greatest presidents, who dared stand up to the establishment and be a true demos, a champion of we, the people, a man who would go out at 5 a.m. in near sub-zero temperatures to shake hands with we, the people, on their way to work, in meatpacking plants, assembly lines, and coal mines, risking life and limb, flying around the country in a turboprop plane. Page 58. Flying to shake hands until his were bruised and bleeding. For what? Only to be laid in state as Abe had before him. Before we, the people under the rotunda, the rota, Taro, the wheel of we all, alive lived to death. On one level, JFK passed that night under the influence of it. It, now not but a microdot dose of it. It, a drop doppelganger in effect of it. Awareness now to be a doppel, or double, stepped in to carry on for the last months of the president's life lived until Dallas. I carry dear the image of him stepping from the Lincoln at Maine and Houston, JFK smiling, strolling across the plaza, engulfed by we, the people who truly loved him. Alas, this could only be parallel dreaming. Yet perhaps JFK's new frontier didn't end in Dealey Plaza. The soul always free, his dream for just us turning into or out of we all the people, opening society operating from a grander level, bursts like a frangible bullet, like an exploding star to serve as genesis for 10,000 JFKs. The next thing, thinking of it, I remember waking from that evening to the early morning light streaming in Abe's bedroom window. In the groggy shadow for a split second, seeing him, Abraham, sitting stoically alone. Then paying attention, going through some motions to make our appointment with the president at 9 a.m. The smile was still there, but the eyes looked past mine as we got our pictures and film, then quickly got on down the road. I never saw Jackie or Mary Meyer again, though I probably thought about one or the other nearly every day for the next 50 years. At one point I wrote a complete novel based on a combination of the characters. This project would consume over a decade, but then that's another story, and we're not there yet.